Hi, hello, welcome back to Foundations of Bioenergetics, or perhaps more properly called Foundations of Body-Based Therapy. My name is Devraj and this is the 9th episode in the series, and today, very exciting, we're going to be looking at the belly area. Maybe I should stand back and pat my belly a little bit. Don't know if that was really necessary, but the belly is absolutely central to my whole approach with body-based therapy, and I think it's been a big part of my personal journey as well, being born kind of very, very cerebral, very, very traumatized. I came from like an adopted kid and abandoned by my parents in a family situation where a lot of quite extreme stuff was going on. I learned very early on, maybe even before I was born, to just get out of there. Just get out of there and get into this abstract ideational world where I felt more safe. I wasn't in my body, but I felt more safe. And so my own journey with bioenergetics, and what I now teach, because, when you go on a deep therapeutic journey yourself, the issues that you have to overcome will be the ones that you can kind of support other people with. That's a bit how it works. So for me, a big part of my journey has been getting more sensation going in my belly. Now, a lot of people, are very busy with the heart, the heart center. By that I mean, right here in the center of the chest. And, fair enough, I lived in a new age spiritual community for about 20 years and was intimately involved in that scene. And a lot of people are really, really busy with the heart. And, the heart is great. It is, if you don't have a connection to your heart center, then it's hard to really feel and be present. You will inevitably be kind of mechanical and robotic. You might get a lot done, but there will be this kind of mechanical thing that you've got going on. And at some point, life will probably feel a bit empty and meaningless. So the heart is super important, but what tends to happen for people once they get a bit of a heart experience going, maybe from doing some kind of, dance workshops, biodanza was always good for that, tantra is always good for that. What tends to happen is that they get very, very obsessed with the heart. This kind of circuit in the body between the heart and the mind is active, so... And one of the manifestations of that is that they then become very rarefied as a person. They can't really just hang out on street level with other people. They have to exist only with other kind of people into whatever they're into, into this heart-centered stuff. And that's fundamentally happening because they're blocked off, Let me step back again. And that's fundamentally happening because they're blocked off, their diaphragm is locked up. They've got this heart thing and this mind thing going on, but the belly down here, the abdominals beneath the diaphragm are blocked. There's a blockage here, blockage here. So the upper half of their body is kind of flowing and graceful and beautiful, but the bottom half is just kind of, lost and mechanical. Basically, it's cut off from. And then at some point in the life of such a person, usually a lot of kind of drama and problems start to manifest. Because on some deep level, the universe is trying to, it's trying to our experience of the world, it's trying to rebirth us, it's trying to make us whole and real, and it doesn't want to just have a world with just people in the heart and the mind, even though that's not nothing, and even though having some level of heart sensation is super, super important. Nevertheless, there's a lot more, and the belly is really the big center lower down. So the belly really, I think the easiest way to describe it is to call it, it's like the center of our primate being, who we are as a primate. If our belly center is open, if we can feel the energy in our belly, then it's like that center is conscious, then everything else connects up inside of us. A lot of stuff that we're trying to get done with our mind, we don't need to do with our mind. We can do intuitively. I've been this year seeing quite a few medical health professionals and stuff like that, just picking up some stuff in my body and dealing with a few issues. And they put their machines on me and they're just they're amazed that I'm 64 years old. And it's not that I'm genetically so great or something like that. It's because I'm doing this work. I'm sure of it. I don't have a way to prove that, but I'm sure of it. When your belly, you can feel your belly more, then there's just more energy flowing in your body and everything connects up. It's like your body can communicate within itself much, much better. You also have a sense of kind of raw power. You don't need to control so much your environment to prevent something bad happening. You can be more spontaneous, and if something bad does start to manifest, there's a lot of energy there which you can push it back in an appropriate manner. either quite forthrightly or just by stating clear boundaries. You know, the belly is the part of the body from where boundaries are naturally mediated. And when we can't feel the belly, then our mind will take over and just try to control everything and lock us up a lot. Okay, so then, how do we avoid our belly? How do we avoid feeling our belly? Because it is so fiery and it is so kind of instinctive and primate, it doesn't fit in well with, the idea for the average Western human of how they should be. And so we learn to shut it down. Like I've already mentioned the diaphragm, but the two main strategies is to pad this area of the body out by eating too much, or kind of the opposite in a way is to tense it up, create massive levels of tension in the abdominal muscles to keep it under control and out of awareness. If you're interested in this tensing thing, you can check out my piece. I wrote a piece on Substack called The Primal Knot a year or two back. And the primal knot was like, it kind of captures in a short sentence this whole idea of really tensing into the belly massively, trying to keep this area under control. And it was actually a phrase that we used a lot when I started to do body-based therapy right at the beginning of the 2000s. Nowadays it's kind of dropped off a lot, which is unfortunate. Okay, so we've got padding it out with food, too much eating. We've got locking the diaphragm so the belly is cut off, and we've got over-tensing. What can we do about these? What are the kind of strategies that we can utilize to start to get our belly more online? Well, the diaphragm is a very interesting area of the body. Let's start with that, because it's a big muscle, bell-shaped muscle underneath the rib cage, and it's not easy to get access to it. But by learning certain breathing techniques, particularly those of Reichian breathwork, you can check out Jack Willis's book, The Reich Home Book, or my book, Reichian Breathing, then you can learn to move the chest and move the belly a lot more when you breathe, and specific techniques that really get those areas going, and that of itself will start to get the diaphragm unlocked. You'll start to feel more energy coming up your body and more natural vitality. You'll start to feel your legs much more. So Reichian breathwork generally is good for the diaphragm area. Next we can look at a kind of more gentle technique which I developed, which is called, I tend to call it belly activation. I'm going to have to step back a bit. Okay, belly activation, it's done along to a 5-minute ding track, and there's 3 stages essentially. And the first stage, you stand with your feet, in fact you keep the same body position throughout, your feet are a bit wider than shoulder width apart, outsides of your feet roughly parallel, and your knees are a bit bent, so that if you wanted to, you could kind of flex up and down on your knees. And then for the first 5 minutes, you close your eyes, you can keep them open if you wish, and you just try to feel into your belly, arms relaxed, you just try to feel into your belly. If you're lucky, you may be able to find a bit of sensation there already, and you can anchor your awareness to it. So you can just keep focusing on that and keep breathing, and that will hold you in that spot. It's very, very helpful to be able to do that. When you first start, maybe there is no sensation in the belly and you can't do it, and that's just how it is. It will come later on. After 5 minutes, you remain in this position, lower body just the same, but you start to make a low sound, like the lowest sound that your body can make. So it might sound something like Now sometimes you can put a little bit of vibration into this sound, but that can strain your throat quite a lot, especially when you start with this stuff or when your throat's not warmed up. And you don't need to do that, but you just make a low sound. Nothing else. You make a low sound, you try to allow it to vibrate down your body and try to feel into your body. Now this is not like a chanting exercise, so don't do overtone chanting, that's a different thing. It's just the lowest sound that your body can physically make. And then when the ding goes, you come into an exercise called Right to Exist. This is a very powerful exercise in its own right, which I sometimes put into other sequences, but you put your palms by your open hands by your side, not too far up and not too far back. You pull your lower body position is just the same as it's been. You pull your hips back, and you flick them forward with aggression, and you make a low grunt sound. So instead of this low vibration sound that you're making, or the low tone, you're now making it into a distinct grunt, like the lowest distinct grunt that you can make. And at the same time as you flick your pelvis forwards and make this low grunt sound, you also make your face ugly like an animal, really like an animal. Push your lower jawbone out and have this feeling in your mind like, I just want to take something. So it looks a bit like try to go into this kind of real primate side of yourself. This on its own, is useful if you're a pleaser. If you're a pleaser, if you're caught up in this kind of oral types of behaviour, then it's very handy. Really make yourself look as ugly as you can and flick your pelvis forward with aggression. And you do this for either 10 or 15 minutes. If you want, you can download a ding track, actually a grunt track, to do this along to, where there's a grunt sound in the background, roughly just faster than once a second, and a ding at the end after 15 minutes. And that gives you a kind of a backing track that you have to keep up with. It's super intense, but it will really get energy moving. So this is belly activation. Those are the 3 stages. It's either 20 or 25 minutes, depending on how long you do the grunting, the right to exist exercise for. And then at the end, you just lie down flat out and relax for another 5 minutes, just feeling your body. Very, very important as usual. Something I also should mention about this right to exist. Many people, when they first start to do it, they kind of start wobbling up and down. But actually it's not that. It's really just coming from between your knees and your hips. Your back, whilst it's not rigid, it's relatively stable. So it's like okay, that's belly activation. That's quite a full-on exercise, but it's actually the one of the less full-on exercises for working with the belly. Working with the belly is naturally very intense. That is just how it is. Now, the most powerful way that I know of working with the belly is with a technique I call intense belly breathing workout. And you can find that on my YouTube channel, like the belly activation, the intense workout, the intense belly breathing workout. It's from around July 2023, something like that. And basically what it consists of is 2 different ways of moving your belly in time to your breath. And what this does is it gets your belly physically moving. So you're really ballooning it out as you inhale and compressing it right back into your body cavity as you exhale. So you're doing deep breathing combined with deep belly movement. And in fact, you do one for 7 minutes like that, and then you change it, because if you stay in a certain rhythm of breathing for a period of time, you learn how to avoid stuff in your own mind. We all do, we've got this tricky little ego that's always trying to kind of avoid a bit. So to kind of get around that at least a bit, after 7 minutes you swap it over for a very intense, all you do, instead of a big breath out, you just suck your belly in and breathe out fast, like can't see my belly moving, but you'll get the idea. And if you look up the video, it's all explained. And you do that a few times around. It lasts about 35 minutes in total. And that's a very, very intense way to really get into your belly, And you may find that it's just too much. It's just too much. It's too intense to get your belly moving like that. And then, it's just appropriate to say, okay, let's turn it down a little bit. Let's not do anything too intense. And by intense, what I mean is it may just in the moment be stirring up a lot and just feel really, really uncomfortable, and your nervous system's going crazy, giving you anxiety, and you just want to stop. Or it might be that later on you're getting very strong physical effects. You find yourself sitting on the toilet for half an hour, you're kind of burping like crazy, your body's contracting and spasming a bit as you go about your daily life. Those are signs that it's very, very intense, and you maybe want to consider to wind it down a little bit. It also might be that it's just stirring way too much stuff up. You might find yourself hyper volatile in the days after you've done it. For example, whereas previously you might have been a little bit of a pleaser, a little bit of a doormat, now there's this kind of volatile fire, and you're ready to just scream at anybody that even tries to transgress your boundaries, or you think they might. And if this is just too much, that's okay. You just find a lower level way of going in there. And you can do like an entry level version, which is shorter. You can also do a version which just uses the big belly breathing and big contraction, doing lying down. I've got different versions on my YouTube channel. But basically the core thing is it gets your belly moving and it gets deep breathing at the same time. And that really is the best, the deepest way to get into the belly and get stuff moving. I personally did over 18 months of doing it pretty much every day, this intense belly breathing workout. And I feel like it gave me a lot. It got me much more anchored down in my belly. And then from there, I could be much more aware of different parts of my body where I really needed to work. Like at the minute, I'm doing a lot of work with a physio guy on my cervical spine, you know, the lower part of my cervical spine where there's stuff, just muscles and bits of disc just locked up there. And I think if I hadn't done the belly work, you know, it wouldn't have been so clear to me, like this is what the next block that I need to work on is. Okay, so that's quite a lot of information about the belly. I hope it's useful for you. Remember, it's just super important, you know, and at some point I think on the body-based therapy journey, you do need to really get in there and work with the belly. Okay, thank you very much for joining me today. I'll have another video out next week. Don't forget to check my website, bioenergetics.org.uk, for courses, books, that kind of thing, one-to-one sessions, and I'll see you all again shortly. Thank you.